17,000 islands, one country. The ocean had every reason to tear it apart and failed. That is the mystery no postcard has ever explained. Not the sunsets, not Bali, not the swing over the jungle that travels so well on screens. The real question about Indonesia has never been why it is beautiful. It has been why it exists at all. A nation flung across volcanoes, monsoon, coral kingdoms, and distances wide enough to swallow entire European countries between its edges, and somehow, across centuries of eruption, tide, empire, and pressure, it did not fracture. It thickened. What you are about to cross is not a travel list. It is one continuous argument made of fire, stone, water, ritual, and time. The argument that distance does not destroy. It transforms. From a capital too heavy to ignore, through temples that turned rock into philosophy, across volcanic spines that never promised safety, past the island the world mistook for the whole country, into seas. So alive, they stopped looking like emptiness and started looking like architecture. This is Indonesia as it has never been compressed before. 10 places. One question: why did the sea fail? 10 places ahead. One of them will change how you see this country. Tell me which one before you've seen them all. Jakarta does not introduce Indonesia. It overwhelms you with it. No soft entrance. No transition. Just pressure concrete, glass, heat, mosque calls, flood channels, motorbikes, and millions of lives stacked upward with the force of something too large to pause for your comfort. If Bali is the image Indonesia exports, Jakarta is the weight that image quietly removes. And that weight is the point. A country scattered across 17,000 islands does not hold together through scenery. It needs gravity. Jakarta became that gravity, not designed to charm, but to anchor. Trade, migration, bureaucracy, ambition, memory, inequality, exhaustion, everything arrives here, and nothing is allowed to feel small. The city is constantly described through its problems. Many are real. But beneath congestion, flooding, and overgrowth, another truth emerges. This is what national magnitude looks like when it becomes urban. Not elegant, not effortless. Jakarta exists to make one thing clear before anything else. Indonesia was never simple, never small, and never built to fit inside the first picture you were given. The real country starts where the postcard stops, and it starts loud. After the noise, silence. After concrete, stone. After pressure, patience. Borobudur does not rise from the Kedu plain like a monument demanding attention. It rises like the earth itself, decided to become sacred. Tier upon tier of volcanic rock ascends in measured geometry, each level pulling the eye upward, each carved relief turning stone into narrative, philosophy, and cosmology at once. Built in the 8th century under the Sailendra dynasty, it is the largest Buddhist temple on Earth. But the statistic is the least important thing about it. What matters is the ambition behind it. A civilization surrounded by rainforest, monsoon, and sea looked at volcanic rock and saw not material, but a map of enlightenment that could outlast every empire that built it. And it did. Indonesia is often imagined as sensory beaches, jungle, weather, color. Borobudur is the correction. This archipelago also thought in symbolic systems, so patient they were measured not in years, but centuries. Not every form of power erupts. Some are carved slowly enough to become permanent. Here, intelligence did not speak. It settled into stone and waited for the world to arrive. Borobudur proved Indonesia could think in stone. Bromo proves the stone was never stable. Forget the postcard. This country trembles. Indonesia sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, where tectonic plates meet with enough violence to lift mountains, fracture coastlines, and remind civilizations that beauty here was never separated from danger. Nowhere does that truth feel more physical than East Java, where Mount Bromo rises from a vast caldera like smoke, still negotiating with the sky. At dawn, it looks impossible. Ash plains stretch beneath ancient volcanic walls. Mist crosses the caldera floor. Bromo exhales pale columns into cold air, while behind it, Semeru Java's highest peak smolders on the horizon, as if even the background refuses to hold still. This is not scenery added to the nation. It is the foundation beneath everything. Indonesia's fertility, density, and danger all originate here in fire, pressure, and the slow creation of land that can feed millions only because it was first violent enough to exist. The sea did not make this country gentle. The earth did not make it safe. Together, they made it alive in a way that comfort alone never could. Now the island, the world already believes it understands. Bali earned its fame. That is precisely what makes the misunderstanding so complete. The terraces hold light, as if designed to cooperate with memory. Temple towers cut the sky with precision that feels both architectural and ceremonial. Offerings appear on sidewalks, shrines, doorsteps, and shop fronts, as if devotion has become the daily surface of life itself. Everything looks effortless. Nothing is, because Bali's beauty was never an accident. It was engineered through Subak irrigation networks, volcanic soil management, temple hierarchies, communal rhythm, and systems of belief repeated across centuries until landscape and ritual became inseparable. The visible grace rests on invisible intelligence, so old it no longer looks like effort. That is what the postcard always hid. Not that Bali is false, it is genuinely extraordinary. But it is one expression of a civilization far larger than a single island, shaped by the same forces of geology, endurance, and adaptation that run through the rest of this country. The world framed Bali as the exception. Indonesia made it the introduction, the softest version of something much harder, much older, and much more vast. What if paradise was never the whole story? Komodo answers by refusing to be beautiful in the way you expect. These islands in eastern Indonesia feel stripped, dry, sunstruck, almost severe. Rock, grass, heat, silence. No soft water, no gentle light. And through that silence moves the Komodo dragon, the largest lizard on Earth. A predator so ancient in appearance, it does not merely look prehistoric. It makes the present feel like a guest. That shift matters more than the spectacle. Every time Indonesia risks becoming too easily tropical, too easily reduced to paradise and soft color, it produces something that restores danger and evolutionary depth to the picture. Coral seas, yes. Pink beaches, yes. But also this, a landscape where survival still looks physical, exposed, and completely unsentimental. Komodo does not flatter. It corrects. This country was never assembled from comfort. It was assembled from collision, plate against plate, island against distance, life against conditions that never promised safety. And on these islands, that truth does not hide in geology, textbooks, or ancient history. It walks in broad daylight, unhurried, indifferent, and older than every story humans have told about this place. Then the sea changes its meaning entirely. For 6 parts, water has been distance, the thing between islands, between cultures, between the fragments of a country that should not cohere. Raja Ampat, off the western edge of New Guinea, reverses that story in a single glance. Limestone islands rise from water, so transparent it barely seems stable. Beneath the surface, reefs unfold with a density of life that turns ocean from backdrop into architecture, not beautiful in the decorative sense, but in the biological sense, where variety itself becomes overwhelming. This is one of the richest marine ecosystems on Earth. And it rewrites the logic of the film. For most countries, the sea is an edge. For Indonesia, it was always the medium carrying trade, migration, language, food, myth, and survival between islands that only look isolated from above. The water did not separate this archipelago. It circulated through it like blood through a body too large to survive on bone alone. Raja Ampat makes that visible. What appeared scattered from a satellite becomes, from within, intricately linked reef to reef, current to current, island to island. The sea was never the threat. It was the architecture. Now the story turns where cameras rarely follow inward. Not toward more coastlines or older stones, but toward the question every civilization must eventually answer: what does death deserve? In the highlands of South Sulawesi, Tana Toraja does not feel separated from Indonesia. It feels like one of the places where the country becomes deepest. Mountains hold villages above terraced slopes. Tongkonan houses rise with curved roofs like vessels pulled upward into still air. But the architecture is not what defines this place. The permanence of ritual is. For the Torajan world, death is not a vanishing. It is a passage, binding obligation, ceremony, family, and remembrance into something larger than grief alone. The dead are not quickly removed from life. They remain present, honored, attended to, kept within reach of the living long enough for the boundary between the two to soften into something the modern world rarely permits. Indonesia is usually shown through motion waves, traffic, eruption, weather. Tana Toraja is the stillness beneath all of it. A country this vast does not hold together through geography. It holds together because meaning was built strong enough, in enough places, to survive distance and time. After stone, fire, ritual, and sea, something older than all of them, Sumatra does not arrive with elegance. It arrives as mass. Long, green, humid, river-cut, heavy, with the weight of life that began early and never fully agreed to modern simplification. Rainforest still covers its mountains in vast breathing expanses, sheltering species that make the island feel less like surviving nature and more like surviving deep time. Orangutans move through canopy. Volcanoes rise behind forest walls. Lakes fill collapsed craters large enough to look like inland seas. Everything here suggests age, pressure, and biological persistence on a scale that makes human timelines feel brief. Sumatra restores the oldest dimension in this story. Not empire. Not capital. Not even ritual. The dimension of living systems that were already ancient before borders, flags, and maps tried to make this archipelago legible. Indonesia is not only a nation held together across water, it is also a region where an older world still breathes beneath the modern one, in fragments powerful enough to humble everything built on top of them. Before Indonesia became a country, it was already a world. Sumatra is where that world still answers back. 10 places, and in every one, the same illusion collapsed. The map made Indonesia look scattered. Distance made it look fragile. The postcard made it look simple. None of them survived contact with the truth. A capital heavy enough to anchor 17,000 islands, a temple that turned volcanic stone into a map of the mind, a chain of fire that made the ground itself impermanent. An island, the world flattened into paradise, with intelligence still visible underneath. A predator old enough to make the present feel temporary, seas so alive, they became the architecture holding everything together. Rituals that kept memory stronger than distance. Forests older than the idea of nations. That is Indonesia. Not one paradise, not one culture, not one mood. A country that should have shattered across the water and instead became whole through movement, eruption, belief, adaptation, and time. The sea did not break it. The sea made it possible, and that is the correction this country makes. What looks broken from above can, from within, become one of the most connected civilizations on Earth. Indonesia was never too scattered to endure. It was scattered on a scale large enough to become permanent. Now, which place changed it for you? Was it the one you expected,